It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy. Like Chris Murphy a lot, interviewed this week talking about the fact that he believes, well, that the Democratic Party hasn't made what he calls a firm break from neoliberalism. And look, this is something we've been talking about here on the program for quite some time. One of the things I'm giving Joe Biden some credit for is moving us away from the neoliberal tendencies of the Democratic Party's past and moving us back into the good old kind of mentality of Democrats being the party of working people. Now, Chris Murphy said, I think there's still a sizable portion of the Democratic Party that's sort of stuck in its addictions to neoliberal economics, that concentrated and globally integrated markets, and the idea that they can deliver prosperity. He said, I think this party has not made a firm break from neoliberalism. He admits that he was guilty accepting the paradigm that we're stuck in at this moment, assume that we had to live, as he put it, with mass concentrations of corporate power. He said, quote, I had no living memory of government using its power to break up monopolies. And I've been saying for quite some time, who's going to be the next Teddy Roosevelt? Who's going to be the next trust buster? Who's going to go after the Standard Oil of the day, or the Amazons, the Googles, and those? Who's going to break that stuff up? Because it's not good for democracy. The mass concentration of wealth in this country, certainly not good for democracy, not good for working people, not good for communities, not good for the country. But understand, we were sold this bill of goods. We were sold the idea that if we give corporations and the wealthy all the power, that wealth would trickle down like rivers of gold and honey. It would be manna from heaven. It was going to be great. It was going to be amazing. Trickle down, supply side voodoo Reaganomics was going to be all the rage. Now look, bipartisan. And I use the word neoliberal, and Murphy did as well. And I had someone say, well, see those darn liberals. And you go, that's not what neoliberalism is. Understand, neoliberalism is simply a political philosophy, an economic philosophy. This idea that by tearing down the rules, by deregulating, by freeing up capitalism, free market capitalism, by keeping government out of people's lives, let the market decide, that mentality, that's neoliberalism. Understand, a lot of crossover. Neoliberals advocate for all of the things that I think are horrible: deregulation, privatization, open border free trade, and a reduction of government spending on the things that we need. So what we've seen is, during the neoliberal era from the middle 70s until I'm hoping right now is we can say it's almost dead, is we've seen massive inequality spring up, especially with working people. We now have social injustice and divisions and look, we used to have a social safety net in this country. It's now been destroyed. And a lot of it was done in the name of bipartisanship. Look, I'm not going to say it's all the Republicans, other than it's all the Republicans and a good number of Democrats who did this under the guise of bipartisanship. Because you go, well, Rick, who are the big neoliberals? The top five in my mind. If you go, give me your top five neolibs. Milton Friedman at the very top, without question. Uncle Milty, one of the most destructive people in the history of this country for working people. sold us on the idea that, it's good to cut taxes for rich people. It's good to have job losses. Really, he did a great job of explaining the economy in a way that benefits rich people and harms working people to our working people. So that makes sense. The number two top neoliberal, Ronald Reagan. You throw Reagan right at the top. This was a guy who, was all about deregulation, all about tax cuts. And of course, he is the guy who birthed the idea of NAFTA. Understand, NAFTA was birthed under Ronald Reagan. It was fully negotiated under H.W. Bush, and it was signed by one of my other neoliberals, Bill Clinton. Because Clinton most certainly was a free trader, someone who went after welfare reform, went after financial deregulation, which brought us, the great collapse of 2008. Thank you for that, Bill Clinton. And of course, all of the Republicans who supported the end of Glass-Steagall. Alan Greenspan, the former Fed chair, he was right there, big supporter, because what caused the collapse in 2008, where we had these financial instruments that were so complicated they couldn't be regulated. Only the people who were involved in them understood, and we found out they didn't understand either. But they were so complicated they can't possibly be regulated. So my question was, why do we have them if they're that complicated? And his admission that, we didn't realize that people would be that stupid. And of course, Larry Summers rounds that out. If I have to pick a third Democrat, I throw Jimmy Carter into the mix, unfortunately. He signed airline and trucking deregulation, which destroyed working class jobs. This whole movement of well-funded, well-organized corporatists saying, hey, give us more power, under the guise of neoliberalism. Now you go, it's those liberals. No, this is the difference between neoliberalism and neoconservatism is neoliberals don't want to go blowing everything up. Neocons want to blow everything up. They're warmongers, but they're right on board with the free market, the deregulation, the privatization schemes that screw us over, the outsourcing of manufacturing. At some point you go, hey, this has been bad. So to hear Chris Murphy say it's time is music to my ears. And what I'm hoping is, I'm hoping that the pandemic awakened the American people, awakened the American working class to the idea that we're too dependent on the rest of the world. We're too dependent for our drugs. We're too dependent for our steel. We're too dependent for, you name it. We're too dependent for our military needs. We're too dependent. And maybe this is the moment where, as I've been saying, Joe Biden is reshoring manufacturing, investing in infrastructure, and doing the things that we need to do to kind of turn the clock on this. So for me, I'm pretty excited about the possibilities that you've got Senator Murphy now saying, hey, we got to do something. And I'm hoping that in this moment, the Democratic Party goes, okay, we tried it. I'm hoping they have the Biden epiphany. We tried it. It didn't really work out well. Let's go a different direction. And what's that different direction? Reshoring manufacturing, investing right here at home. And I would throw in there regulating corporate America and taxing corporate America. And then investing that money right here where it needs to be done. To me, that's the start of it. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, Scott Paul, the president from the Alliance for American Manufacturing, going to be here to share some thoughts on the military part of this. Look, we don't make all the things we need. And I don't think that's such a good idea. Right back. Stick around.
I've been driving buses for 5 years, and my day-to-day routine is I wake up a little earlier than most people. I get on a bus, I go out, I pick up some students and make sure they get to school nice and safe. Here in Fairbanks, Alaska, that can be a challenge because of the winter weather and the icy roads. But I love the job. So the Teamsters are great. They provide us a lot of protections. They've always taken care of their people, made sure that our jobs were secure. We didn't have to worry about whether or not we'd have a job from day to day.
And that's amazing because before we'd be working 4, 6, 8 hours a day,
and only earning minimum wage was real difficult to make a living. And then the Teamsters pushed a law so we make something we can live off of and not have to have a second job. What absolutely gives me peace of mind. The union membership allows me to focus on this job without having to worry about whether or not my family is going to be taken care of. I'm Andrew Case, and I'm proud to be Teamsters Local 959.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as we've been talking about the fact that we've lost our manufacturing prowess, and I always point to the fact that in Trenton, New Jersey, they've got that bridge that says Trenton makes the world takes, and that used to be the American dream. That was the way. That's who we were. We were the ones who built stuff, said it to the rest of the world. And I think what the pandemic, as I pointed out, showed us, we're kind of we're dependent on the rest of the world. And now you got this story that came out of Politico. Evidently a leaked draft of this National Defense Industrial Strategy shows trouble. And here to share some thoughts on just how much trouble, I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, the website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it is so great to be with you.
Now, you guys literally wrote the book on this topic, the fact that, and this has got to be over a decade ago, saying, look, we've lost our manufacturing. We don't make all of the things that we need to protect ourselves, to equip our military. And now you've got this leaked strategy saying, hey, we don't have the capacity.
Yeah, I wish I could say it was a surprise, but we've seen this coming for a long time. And just as many consumers, businesses experience shortages or delays or disruptions during the pandemic, and then some of the supply chain issues after that, there's been this like secret almost in the defense industrial base that we've had for a while. And the secret is this: it's like we still have amazing technological capabilities. Like if you ask our scientists and engineers and researchers to come up with new weapons, new platforms, utilize AI, autonomous technology, they can do all of that.
Right.
And there's no one better at that. The issue has to do with our capacity to make these things in the country. And in some cases, it's like barely being able to make them at all, particularly if they're involving sophisticated electronic equipment, okay? And then more broadly, to be able to mass produce things, which from a national security perspective, you need to be able to do. And then on top of that, Rick, is like to be able to mass produce sophisticated things with speed, with velocity. And that's what we are seeing just with our problems right now in supplying Ukraine with the arms that it needs, much less if we were to, God forbid, get into some circumstance where we need it for our own military.
Right.
Would be very exceptionally difficult across a number of different types of weapons platforms or armaments to be able to churn out things at the replacement rate that is necessary to sustain a defensive or offensive front or effort for a period of time. And I hope this sets off alarm bells. I was hoping our report did 10 years ago that we wrote called Remaking American Security. But it seems like it's going to take this Pentagon report, hopefully, to get some more eyes on this problem.
We were the arsenal of democracy, and somehow we've given that away. And I'm going to say given it. We didn't lose it. We know exactly where it is. We gave it away for the allure of cheap goods. Now, I've said numerous times over the years that, we've given away industry after industry. We've allowed the Chinese to come and box up factories and move them and recreate them overseas. And I said, look, if we do, and look, I'm not advocating for war, but if something happens, do you think we're going to be able to pick up the phone and go, hey, China, the magnets that we need for our smart bombs that we used to make, in the Midwest that are now made in China somewhere, can we have some? Those things that make our smart bombs smart, because we need them to bomb you with. Do you think that's going to happen?
Yeah. Well, I know that was a rhetorical question.
Of course it was. It's the same thing with the chips, which is why I think it's fantastic that Biden and Democrats and a couple of Republicans said, look, we should be making this stuff at home.
Yeah. And I think that is the issue, is that, there's a lot that goes into the defense industrial base, and you can take it all the way from materials like steel, and then we'll get to the sophisticated electronics. But even within steel, I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I'm old enough to remember this, because I'm not. But World War II, we had tank factories, and we built battleships alongside where our steel mills were.
Yep.
And I think, Sparrows Point in Baltimore is a good example of that. And we don't even have enough of that anymore. We don't have enough shipyards anymore. And so that's terrifying, right? And then to add on to it, this idea that for a lot of different types of electronics, batteries, what have you, that we have zero capacity in the United States, or virtually not, to do that right now. And for some critical minerals, the supply chain by and large is controlled by China, whether it's in country or through investments that it's made in Africa or other places. And so, we've been trying to shine a light on this for a long period of time. And I would just say, I mean, to the Biden administration's credit, I think that they understand that this is a problem, that they're not pretending like it's not a problem. But it will take a massive effort to be able to develop some of this capacity. I mean, we saw it was a heavy lift to get that semiconductor capacity kind of start to be scaled up again. And then this is a 5 or 10 year project. I mean, same thing holds true really for a lot of these different types of armaments. And again, this is not to say we're great at like making these ideas,
right?
But it's making them at scale where we're going to run into problems.
No, the thing is and this is what's bothered me for some time. We have the Berry Amendment, and I have friends who go, well, we got the Berry Amendment. All military stuff has to be made in the U.S. That's pretty simple. And yet we have all of these waivers because we don't make a lot of the stuff that we need, and that we end up having to go hat in hand begging for. And I think, and I'm hoping coming out of the pandemic that people realize how dependent we are, and then we start clawing that back. And which is why, I led off today with this, with Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut, saying, look, the Democratic Party hasn't made a firm break from neoliberalism. We need to stop this neoliberal thinking and start doing the things that made the country really, really great. Investing in our infrastructure, investing in manufacturing, investing in workers and home. And I'm hoping that picks up.
Yeah, and you're onto something. I think Senator Murphy was certainly onto something as well with that. Is that the deindustrialization, the neoliberalism has impacts at multiple layers in this country. You see the personal impact and the epidemic of loneliness that I think Senator Murphy is really adept at talking about, and the consequences of that, whether it's mental health or life expectancy. Then there's the community level, where you see communities where things may be costing more, but wages are not as good as they had been. And over a long period of time, that has generational impacts. And sure, you can do this. I know I can. You look at what Main Street looks like today compared to what it looked like, say, 30 years ago, and it's different in a lot of places, and not for the better. And then there's the broader impact that we're talking about on our national security. And if you add all of this up, the neoliberal policies and this neglect, when everything is working perfectly, Rick, we take things for granted so much, but it's when you get into a conflict or you have a disruption, I mean, that's where all of this gets exposed. And so semiconductors, bringing that back is a good first step, but there's so much more that we have to do. And I'm not saying this because we got to prepare for war or anything like that. I'm just saying that because if we don't have that capacity, countries who are not our allies are going to notice that. And they will limit our geopolitical options down the road. And they're going to be more likely to send the world into turmoil if they don't think that we have the capacity to respond in some way. So it's a big deterrent rather than like being aggressive in some way. And so I'm glad that you've raised this up.
This is why I'm a big fan of the Teddy Roosevelt quote, walk softly and carry a big stick. By having that capacity, by having that big stick, you stop a lot of things before they ever happen. And I'm a big supporter of that. I'm not a warmonger. I'm not someone who says we should be intervening everywhere around the world. But I still think you need to show strength, and I think that deters a lot. But we'll see where this takes us in the new year. I want to finish up with we're heading to the holiday season. It's coming along a lot quicker than my shopping list is ready for. But you guys have put out a list of ways to help me buy good, solid American-made products for the gifts of this year. You've got that at AmericanManufacturing.org. Tell me about some of the stuff that we're looking at.
Yeah, this is pretty great. And our elves at the Alliance for American Manufacturing spend months kind of curating this list. We have more than 200 gift ideas at all different price points in all different categories that are made by companies in all 50 states and the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. And so whether it's a pet toy or a piece of jewelry or a watch or something for your kids, or a collectible or some knit clothing. I mean, there's so much stuff on there. And the great thing about this too, Rick, is that, we've identified some union-made options on there as well, like All-Clad, which is made in Pennsylvania by steelworkers, or Cutco knives made by steelworkers in New York, and Fiesta Ware. Made in West Virginia, and a bunch of others as well. And so this guide has never been more popular. We've had a lot of interest in it. And I know, my wife looking for ideas is like, oh yeah, I didn't realize that was like made in Rhode Island and cool stuff like that. And so I guarantee that if you look at this list at AmericanManufacturing.org, you will find something that is sure to delight someone in your life. And it's going to be supporting jobs, sustainability, all the things that we hold near and dear here in the United States.
If we're going to revitalize Main Street, this is the way to do it. This is the way to begin doing it. If we're going to revive and reunite this country, we reunionize it. A lot of good things for the coming year, and the hope is folks go to AmericanManufacturing.org, check out those gifts, and make not just someone happy for this holiday season, but also create some jobs and help people on Main Street. Scott, as always, I appreciate the time.
Hey, Rick, thank you so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Our good friend Scott Paul. Again, remember, check out the website, AmericanManufacturing.org. Going to take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
The old factory towns in America's heartland have been taking a beating. Thing is, though, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. After years of politicians talking about it, they finally passed a big new infrastructure package to rebuild roads and bridges, fix drinking water systems, and make the energy grid more secure. We're finally turning things around after 40 years of screwing over working people. But will we keep moving in the right direction? That's our choice as Americans.
I took 2 years of electric in high school, and I was the only girl in the class there. Here, I'm the only girl as far as installers go. I'm a single mom, too. I joined the union because it gave me options for healthcare and life insurance so that I know my son's taken care of. I like what I do. Like, this is the best job I've ever had. You think solar panels is more like California. You wouldn't think Appalachia would have any. It would be smart if the government would invest more in clean energy resources.
Calling all builders. Your country is calling you. Tackling climate change is the job of our lifetime. It's time to build back better. Let's get to work.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, again, I come back to this idea that Chris Murphy is throwing out. Time to kill off neoliberalism. And I remember there was a moment when I first started this show back in 2005. And I'm not going to say who the guy was or the union, who it was. But I went to the unions right away and I said, hey, I've got this idea and I could use some help, some funding. I want to talk about working class issues. I want to talk about austerity. I want to talk about neoliberalism. Now, understand, this is well before these words became, well, everyday common language in this country. It's what the rest of the world was dealing with well before we were, but it hadn't gotten around to us yet. We hadn't felt the pain yet. And I remember this person going to me, a lot of our friends are neoliberals. And I go, maybe you need different friends, because this idea of selling off all of our goods, the parking authorities, the turnpikes, the water and sewer, instead of basically selling off everything that we have, instead of deregulating, instead of saying, here, corporate America, take more, have more control. Because what we've done is we've ceded government control and power of we the people to corporate interests. So when people say, I feel like the game is rigged, I feel like I don't have a chance, it's because corporations have dominated every aspect of your life. And they've got the media power to then go out and say, no, it's not us. It's them. It's them. It's those politicians. It's those liberals. And the reality is, and we know this already, the reality is corporate America has been robbing us blind for decades. For decades. For those of you watching on TV, we're going to end for this evening. For those listening on the radio, we're going to take a quick break right back after this. You want more information, more stuff? TheRickSmithShow.com. That's where you go. Back after this.